Hey everybody, so today we're going to be talking about just a very quick review of A Quiet Place Part 2. I went to the movie theater to see this. I was not disappointed. Now in this review, there's not going to be any spoiler alerts in this. I'm not going to ruin the plot. I'm not going to ruin any surprises. If you saw Part 1, then you have a pretty good idea of what you're looking at with Part 2. But regardless, I'm going to talk about my opinions of it, what I thought, and an overview of the storyline. But again, no big twist and turns will be exposed in this. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump on in. Now, as you can see, we have gone out into the wilderness. Actually, my front yard, but we can pretend that we're deep in the woods somewhere. I wanted to go out here to kind of celebrate the vibe of A Quiet Place Part 2, because in this movie, we are now venturing out into the world. Remember, Part 1, we kind of saw what the director was establishing, the world that he created. And in Part 2, we're entering into the film with that knowledge, but also into a new realm. So the movie was originally supposed to be a 2020 release, but they decided to hold out to do it in the theaters to give it a proper, theatrical release. And I'm gonna say this, it was so well worth it seeing in the movie theater. You know how they say, like, there are some movies that you just need to see in the theater? Okay, this is one of them, 100%. Absolutely was so happy that I went to go see this in the movie theater. It completely adds to it. And honestly, y'all, I mean, a lot of times I like to go see horror films in the movie theater for obvious reasons. Everybody's screaming, so on and so forth. But this one actually just had this energy, the way it was filmed, the way the storyline unfolded, the whole 9 yards, that just made it that much more fun to watch in the movie theater. So A Quiet Place Part 2, it's picking up like a year after where we left the Abbott family from the last film. Now, obviously, they are still maneuvering their way, trying to figure out how to live in a world where sound attracts these things that come and obliterate anything that is making a sound. Now, like I said, in this film, we are seeing the Abbott family having to venture out into the world. They are having to leave their safety net. And so you're entering into the world of that. How are they going to maneuver? How are they going to survive? Emily Blunt leads the film again, and she gives an amazing performance. All the actors and actresses in this film were amazing. And here's one huge difference that I think takes place with horror films. A lot of time horror films, thriller films, that type of thing, but especially like the slashers and stuff like that. Obviously this isn't a slasher film, but nonetheless, they rely on people who, haven't done that many acting gigs, so on and so forth, to just kind of create that illusion of this could be a regular person. So in this film, I felt like they really did an amazing job of the casting in Part 1 and Part 2. And they got talent in there that could really carry these roles and add depth to them. Obviously, we all know Emily Blunt. She is a well-known actress. And so even with that being said, she just brought so much to this role and made it so real for the situation that she was in. Emily Blunt is married to the director, John Krasinski. Now remember, he directed Part 1 and obviously directed Part 2. And now here's some little side note trivia, I guess, if you could. So he was basically like, I ain't doing Part 2, okay. And Emily was like, no, I don't think I'll do that either. But they ended up signing on to it, and by hook or crook, they ended up doing it. Thank God. I felt like, sure, somebody else could have done a good job with it, but I felt like it was almost one of these things where it was like, this was their baby type situation, and they brought to it a level of care with it that somebody else doing a sequel might not have. Because let me tell y'all this. Y'all probably feel the same way. Let me know if you do or do not in the comment section. Okay, I have a certain expectation for sequels, and it ain't good, okay? This sequel, honestly, y'all, was just as good as the first, and I never say that, okay? Maybe on Aliens, there's a few sequels that really hold up. This is one of them. Now, what I want to talk about is one of the things that John does, the director John, does really well in this film, and that is tension. So, again, he established what this world was in Part 1. He establishes what it is in Part 2 right off the bat. You make a noise, you die. Let's just break it down to that type thing. Okay, so John has created this storyline because, again, you have these characters, they're coming together, they're trying to survive, they're going out there in the world, trying to make it, And oftentimes during this, you're following different characters who are each on their different journey. Like, they're not together is what I mean. And they're doing something differently. And then all of a sudden the tension will rise for each of their storylines and it will collide. And not really so much intersect with one another, but that tension comes to a height on each of their storylines. And John does an amazing job at that in this film. I mean, I'm not lying, y'all. I was literally like watching like, oh my God, oh my God. I mean, I'm not lying. I was literally clutching Matt's arm the whole time, and other people in the theater were. It was not just me being, you know, Mr. Silly Willy. And on the note of that tension, you're thrown into this tension like right off the bat in this movie, and it does not let up. The only time it lets up is so that you can catch your breath for like a hot second, and then it goes right back into it. So I mean, literally, when I say you're on the edge of your seat for this film, you were on the edge of your seat. Now, one question I found myself asking after seeing this film and seeing how good of a job they did with part 2 was, where can they go from here? Because they, and I'm not going to spoiler alert it, but they 100% set this film up for another sequel. But I was also thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? They could do sequels and prequels. I mean, let's be honest, even if they didn't set it up for that, you know they could, because it was a huge success at the box office, so you know they're going to make more. Here's my thing with it. This is where the next person coming and making a film that follows this, or, you know, is a prequel, is going to have to be careful, because they did such an amazing job with part 2 that part 3 could definitely be like, this is where it could go down south. Let's all remember Jeepers Creepers part 3. For me personally, a prequel does not really interest me for this film. I kind of feel like the more I knew about these creatures and all that, it would take away from the scary part to it. Sure, it would be interesting. I could see going forward one more step with this film, explaining, okay, now that we have this information that we learned in part 2, where do we go with that? How do we survive? So, you know, listen, I'm giving this 2 thumbs up. Drop what you're doing, get your mask on, and go to the damn theater and watch this at the theater while you can. It is amazing. Now, if you want to see some of my story times about things that I do that are like, you know, oh, movies that wrecked my childhood, and hear me actually talk and relate the story in a story format, check that playlist out that I'm putting up. If you're into true crime and want to hear some of my stories on that, or some of the news that I follow in true crime, check out my true crime channel, Reporting Live from My Sofa. I'm going to put a little screenshot of it up here. All the links are down below for the description, so be sure and check those out. I appreciate you watching this. Definitely go see this movie, and guess what? I'll see you on my next movie binge.